have time at the end for some questions from the audience. Our members of the Governmental Affairs Committee who have put this forum on are here today to help you get your questions heard. So they will be on either side of the room, and you can just make a motion that you're ready to ask your question by raising your hand. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you again for being here. Dr. Brunstein, it's all yours.
Is the microphone important for the recording? Or?
Yes.
All right, good morning, everyone. I don't know if this is working, but okay, very good. Can't hear it.
Morning.
Welcome to all the candidates. Appreciate you all showing up and everybody in the community who's come out today. As Katie said, each candidate will be given a 2-minute opening statement, followed by 5 questions that were prepared by the VCDC Government Affairs Committee. I'll be asking all the candidates the same questions, and then you all have 2 minutes to respond. After we finish with that, we'll open up the discussion to guests who will have 1 minute to share their questions, and the candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to those questions, okay? So, again, welcome. We appreciate you coming here. It's a vital opportunity for us to hear from our candidates. I think we'll go in the order that it was established on the program, which is actually in alphabetical order, strangely enough. I don't know if this was intentional, but we'll start with Senate candidate Church and work our way down. So if you could introduce yourselves, you have 2 minutes to make your opening statements. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Jeffrey Church, and I'm running for the District 17 State Senate seat to bring accountability, fiscal responsibility, and conservative leadership values to Pierre. I served 30 years active duty, United States Army. In that time, I completed 5 combat tours to include Kosovo, Afghanistan twice, Iraq twice, and I retired as a full colonel. I'm wearing all that right here. Those years taught me leadership, sacrifice, and responsibility. South Dakota, Vermillion specifically, is my home by choice. I chose this community because it's where I want to worship, work, and live. I'm a Christian, a husband, a father, and a grandfather, and a lifelong conservative. All my children and grandchildren live here in Vermillion. I've earned degrees in political science, public administration, law, right here at USD School of Law, and I'm currently working on a PhD in water law at South Dakota State University. I know that's a bad word around here, but it's the only place I could do it. I'm running to defend our First and Second Amendment rights, protect private property rights, stand for the right to life, and support parental rights. I want to eliminate property and grocery taxes, reduce the state sales tax, cut spending, not grow it, and end corporate handouts that favor well-connected over the hardworking families and small businesses of South Dakota. I spent my entire adult life defending our country. Now I'm asking for the opportunity to defend our way of life right here at home. I'm ready to serve again, this time for the people and families of District 17. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Senator Davis.
Thank you. My name is Sydney Davis. I'm currently serving as your state senator. It's been an honor the last 4 years to serve you in Pierre. When I'm not in Pierre, I work here in town at the hospital and providing anesthesia services. I'm a nurse anesthetist. I have 3 young kids and a husband. We live north of town on a farm. Grew up farming and ranching and really excited to continue that with our young family now. Lifelong South Dakotan. My job in healthcare actually brought us to this corner of the state, and then had an opportunity through a family connection to carry on the tradition of agriculture in our family. And so we're so grateful for those opportunities that I've had and that our family has had because of people that have come before us. Good policy that has been made in this state, and so I recognize that. I'm a benefactor of that, and so looking forward to continuing to help craft those good policies so that selfishly my kids can stay here and have opportunities like I had as well. In my time in Pierre, I've had numerous legislative successes, and I'm super excited about a lot of them. But to give a little credit to some of those successes, it's because a lot of them were inspired by folks in this room, folks watching at home, that brought their ideas to me, and I just helped bring them to life and make them state law. And so I just want to say thank you again. Thank you to VCDC for putting this on, those that are here today in person for spending your Saturday morning with us, and those watching at home. Looking forward to the conversation today. Thanks.
Thank you. Representative Casson.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bronstein. And thanks everybody for being here this morning. Like Senator Davis said, it's 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and there's many places I'm sure you'd rather be. I'm Representative Chris Casson. I've been your representative the last 4 years and been honored to do it. I do want to take a brief moment to recognize Representative Bill Shorma, who I served with the last 4 years, became a dear friend of mine and served District 17 really well the last 4 years. So I think it's important we give him a round of applause. Quickly, a little bit about myself. We live here in Vermillion. I've lived in Vermillion since I graduated from college. It's our home. I'm the vice president of the University of South Dakota Foundation. Served that role for 5 or 6 years now. My wife, Katie, grew up in Colombe, South Dakota, came to USD. She's a PA by trade and teaches at the PA program at the University of South Dakota. We have 2 children. Our daughter Collins is 12, and our son Kellen is 9. Yeah, they're busy today. I made the decision to run the first time based upon them and based upon making sure that there are opportunities for them when they graduate, and make sure there are opportunities for them and for their kids, and that the way of life that we have in South Dakota continues. I was selected to be on the Appropriations Committee my first term the first term I went there, or that I was elected, and I've enjoyed it ever since. We are a fiscally conservative state, and we're proud of that. We balance the budget every year, and we're proud of that. And we do the very best we can, to help those that need it the most. So I look forward to today, and thank you again.
Thank you. House Candidate Redler.
My name is Troy Redler. I'm a healthcare professional and small business owner. I own a long-term care pharmacy that takes care of the most vulnerable people in our society. I was really compelled to run for District 17 House for a multitude of reasons. One of them, we currently service 82 facilities in 3 states and 2,000 of the most vulnerable people in our society. I will tell you there are challenges in that environment. In South Dakota over the last 10 years, 10% of the nursing homes have closed with the large demand of our long-term care in the next 10 years with the baby boomers going into those long-term cares. I think it's really important to focus on that issue. I want to bring my small business experience. I want to bring my focus in healthcare, especially rural healthcare, and I want to be able to give legislators a perspective for a currently serving member of the healthcare community, and it really is something that's really dear to my heart. Alexander Redler in the back row, I think there is an age limit. He's my 11-year-old son. He is part of the reason I'm running as well. I want to give him the opportunities that I had. I want him to choose South Dakota as a place to live and work, not because Dad makes him to, but makes him serve here, but because it's the best opportunities. I want him to look at that and say, the grass is greener in South Dakota. I made my home in South Dakota 20 years ago when I moved my family and my business from where I was born in Nebraska. I chose this state, and I chose it for a reason. So thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. I appreciate this opportunity, and thank you, Dr. Bronstein.
Thank you. House Candidate Charo.
Hello, my name is Robin Shiro, and I'm running for South Dakota State House. I wanted to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here on the day that most of us celebrate Earth Day. It is unfortunate that this day was chosen by our community for this legislative forum because I, like you, would rather be cleaning up one of our rivers, planting a tree, or spending time with family appreciating the outdoors. I have worked my whole 40-plus year career as a professionally licensed civil environmental engineer. I help companies such as Tyson, Nutriflow, and CF Industries here in our surrounding communities to raise global awareness about environmental environmental protection, promoted sustainability, and drove pollution prevention to conserve water and energy. I attended South Dakota School of Mines in Rapid City and earned 2 engineering degrees, then went on to get an MBA in management and finally an executive master's in sustainability leadership. As a Legion Auxiliary member, a VFW Auxiliary member, and a previous Coast Guard Auxiliary member, I am reminded that today is also American Legion Family Day, which is the day that the Legion encourages local posts to open their doors to the community for camaraderie, fun activities, and to raise awareness of the Be the One initiative to reduce veterans' suicides. I am looking forward to the country's 250th birthday this summer because I am a proud descendant of 2 patriots, one on each side of my family, since my family is originally from Pennsylvania. One of those patriots signed the Declaration of Independence, George Ross, and his nephew married the infamous Betsy Ross. It is with the same hard work and dedication to the people that I became a county commissioner, and while in office was awarded the United States Republican County Official of the Year in 2008. I work hard in office and in my community, which is why I was recently awarded the 2025-2026 Elk of the Year from the Sioux City Lodge for helping to work to deliver 312 Christmas food baskets, ultimately assisting 533 adults, including 65 veterans and 488 children. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank to all of you. We very much appreciate you being here on this Saturday morning. So I'm going to proceed with 5 questions that were prepared by the Government Affairs Committee, and I'll ask all of you to respond to them, okay? I think we'll start with Senate Candidate Church on the right here. So the first question, what are your top 3 priorities for the 2027 legislative session?
Thank you for the question. I appreciate it. It won't take me 2 minutes to answer this. My top 3 priorities are, first, we need to reduce state spending. So that's priority 1, reduce the spending. Second is reduce state taxes. And the third is to eliminate special economic conditions for foreign businesses. And when I say foreign, I don't mean outside of the U.S. Foreign would be a business that comes from outside of South Dakota. So those are the 3 things: reduce state spending, reduce state taxes, and eliminate the special economic conditions that foreign businesses receive.
Excellent, thank you.
Perfect, thank you. For me, I had a couple bills that I'm hoping to bring back again this next year, revolving around health insurance reform so that patients and families can actually utilize the coverage that they are paying for and help reduce some red tape and bureaucracy. That's something, a legislative priority of mine. And then I also want to look at what we call the Big 3 funding. This is where a majority of our budget spending is at. It goes to education, taking care of the vulnerable, people that can't take care of themselves, and state employees. To me, this is our core government responsibilities, and so I want to look at that and make sure that we are meeting our obligations there and be strategic and efficient in how we spend those dollars to meet those needs. And then lastly, I want to look at affordability. We know that South Dakotans are feeling the pain of inflation, and so how can we find ways to keep more money in people's pockets and help them live the South Dakota dream? And I think there's a variety of ways to do that. I think we look at reducing red tape where it might have repercussions of increasing costs. I think we can also make it easier for first-time homeowners to buy a home. I think there's a lot of creative things we can do, but it's going to take creative thinking and bold leadership and vision to do that, and I'm looking forward to being part of those solutions.
Yeah, so, everything that I do builds off of the reason why I ran, and that's my children, and making sure that what we do in South Dakota is conducive to a life that they would want to stay and work and raise a family here in South Dakota. So as we talk about priorities for the 2027 legislative session, for me, it always starts with being responsive to the people of District 17. It always starts with constituent services, and that will always be number 1. We need to respond to the needs and what the people of District 17 want, expect, and to Senator's point, bringing bills that truly affect the people within this district. I do believe in keeping government limited, keeping government out of people's lives. I think it's an important tenet of what we do, and the reason, again, going back to why this is an attractive place to live is we do try and keep government out of people's lives. I also think it's important that we respect local control, and I think what you've seen in Pierre is a large push to try and control people's lives and try and control what they do. We have county commissions, we have city councils, we have school boards for a reason. They're the people who are elected to be closest to the people. And if in Pierre, there's a role for state government, there is. But we also have to respect the work of those folks that they're doing, because they're responsive to the people and they're actually closer to the people than we are in Pierre. So I think having that local control is important. I will just add another one. I've been beating the drum on the aging population of South Dakota and some of the elder care things that are going to be impacting our state moving forward. It's really nice to have Troy Redler come on board here with his experience in this space, and maybe can help me as we continue to make this known that this is an issue that's gonna really impact this state. So maybe more than 3, but I appreciate it.
It's going to be hard following him all day. You took all the good ones, Chris. So I like to call them my 3 E's. I've got education, economic opportunity, and elder care. As far as education goes, I know many people look at that like an expense. It's an investment in the future. We have to look at that like we are getting successful members of society that are going to stay and play important roles in our community. And, by the way, pay taxes, so we can broaden our tax base. We need to stop the brain drain, very important. Second one, economic opportunity. We definitely want to highlight economic opportunities where they exist. I think looking at new approaches with partnerships with trades in the apprenticeship programs with local employers, I would love to explore that option more. Elder care. Chris did state it very well. I will tell you that there are regulations, and I can go on and on. I only have 2 minutes, but I've seen very interesting knock-on effects of the legislation to elder care facilities. One of them being, I ran into a position where Medicaid wasn't going to cover over-the-counter products, and what happened was the knock-on effects was they changed cheap over-the-counter products to expensive prescription items. And I looked at that and I said, okay, the goal was to reduce costs. We did not do that. The goal was to make sure we're taking care of our seniors. We changed their meds that they were stable on. It was a lose, 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 lose. And that's just one very specific example. But I would focus on, educating legislators. If we do this, there's a good chance that's going to happen. So.
My first priority would be the legislature needs to find new and/or alternate funding sources, such as introducing legislation of definitions of presumed abandonment of unclaimed property, as other states have, in order to help things be affordable in this state, such as food, clothing, housing, healthcare, daycare, veteran services, schooling, property taxes, etc. Other new funding sources are taxing semi-trucks traveling through our state by various methods, such as weight of the vehicle and the number of miles traveled, and IFTA surcharge or mileage-based user fees. My second priority is South Dakota being 9th in the nation for human trafficking. We need to concentrate on going after those criminals committing those crimes with a vengeance, because usually they are committing other crimes that precipitated the human trafficking, such as chemical addiction, possession and or distribution of drugs, and mental health issues. My third priority, is we need to stop elected official abuse of power and corruption, such as election integrity, because it's not only costing the taxpayers time and money, but it's also ruining our quality of life that we so enjoy in South Dakota. Examples of this are the South Dakota Attorney General and the South Dakota Secretary of State. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So for this next question, I'm going to ask Senator Davis to go first. How do you balance competing interests when making difficult decisions?
Thank you for the question. We encounter this quite frequently in the legislature, so it's a very appropriate question, but I'd like to say I've got a few years of experience in this now. So for me, I'm always interested in hearing both sides of the story. And so I try to seek out both sides of the story, hear both sides of the arguments, and then also seek out facts. And lastly, always look back home. Look to the stakeholders back in our community, who this affects. For example, if this is an education bill, I want to speak to parents, I want to speak to families, and I want to speak to teachers, I want to speak to our school administrators. I want to hear from people that are going to be directly affected by this proposed legislation. I think too, taking into account the state impact, and then also I always consider my personal values and trust my instincts sometimes as well, because a lot of folks put their trust in me when they voted for me to put me here in this spot to make these decisions. And so I always marry all of these factors together to how I come to a decision. So thank you for the question.
Thank you. Representative Casson.
Yeah, thank you. You know, we hear a lot of bills. I think this year was the most bills we've heard were introduced in South Dakota since what, maybe 20 or 90, maybe 20 years ago, 98 maybe. So it was over 600 bills that were introduced. Yeah, I use a very simple framework when looking at all the bills. I try to keep it simple, and I use what I call the C's approach. Number one, is it constitutional? This needs to be the foundation of everything that we do. Number two, is it common sense is a big one, right? Does it make sense for the people of District 17? And quite frankly, does it pass the smell test? Is this something that actually seems to make some sense? Third is constituents. Again, as the senator mentioned, depending what the issue is, it's talking to the folks back home that matter. It's also being accessible to the people, and I've prided myself on being accessible to people of District 17, offering my cell phone number, offering my email address, responding to every email that I get. And I want to hear from people on these issues when we hear that. It makes a huge difference when you hear for the constituents. I added a fourth C, going back again, I hate to beat the drum, but going back to children, my children. And is it going to impact our future generations of South Dakotans, and is it going to impact them in a positive way? So if you look at the Constitution, if you look at common sense, if you look at what the constituents want, and you view it through the eyes of whether or not it's going to impact our future generations in a positive way, generally it's going to lead you to making a pretty informed and wise decision for the people of District 17. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Redler.
Once again, tough to follow, but I will tell you, I liked Chris' answer, to be completely honest with you. I think it's important to use the diverse knowledge base in the legislature. I know it might come to a shock to everyone in this room. I'm not an expert on everything. My son will let you know that. But it's important to reach out to resources that are subject matter experts to be able to leverage their knowledge as well to make important decisions. We need to be cost conscious when taking money from taxpayers, because everything is taxpayer funded. We need to make sure that it's a good investment. Are we going to get a return on this investment if we are passing this legislation? Do we expect a return? Whether short-term or long-term, there needs to be a return on that investment. And I hearken back to education. We want to make good education important to the state because we want to retain good people. We want to have a knowledge population that is going to make sure that we have the healthcare resources we need. We lost 1,000 healthcare workers in the long-term care space, along with 10% of our long-term care facilities. We need to retain those people. 2/3 of the people in this room are going to need long-term care services eventually, so this is a selfish need. We want to have that access when we need those services. But we need to be creative with solutions. We're talking about closing down rural healthcare facilities. What's wrong with having them have one room that may be already empty in their building, potentially be a urgent care, telemedicine, telepharmacy, giving access to rural areas and giving them another revenue resource to stay in business as opposed to close their doors.
Thank you.
We as legislators are sent up here to represent our constituents, so I would try to have town hall meetings as often as I could to understand where the hearts lie on the hot topics for the district and the state. As a lifelong engineer, I would try to be prepared for any of those issues prior to heading to Pier. But if that is not possible, I would spend time with all competing interests and hear all sides of the issues. I have not taken any campaign funding, although the South Dakota Secretary of State's office required me to establish a campaign finance committee. I feel that if I do not take any funding from any special interest, then I will not be beholden to any of them. Therefore, I can concentrate on the pros and cons of the issues instead of their personal agendas. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate
you.
Church.
So first off, I haven't made any legislative decisions yet. With your help, I'll be able to do that very soon. So what will I do? I'll look towards my values, our community values, and some of those values include individual freedoms and limited government, right? Does this legislation increase individual liberty? Does this increase religious freedom? Will this defend personal property rights? I look to see, is this a fiscally responsible bill? Does it promote free market activity? Does this increase government spending or decrease government spending? And I'm not opposed to all increases. There are legitimate functions for government. And if that's what we're talking about, then increases in spending are perfectly legitimate. It's all the other things that are not core functions of government that I look to reduce and eliminate. And I would refer to our 2024 South Dakota GOP conservative platform. That has a lot of good bullet points in it and explains conservative values. And so I would look to that document to guide how I decide to vote. And finally, as everyone else has said, it's the will of the voters. I need to hear from the people that I represent. It's easy to get a hold of legislators. The emails are posted, the phone numbers are posted. You can reach out to the Capitol and leave a message. So I would definitely want to hear from every constituent. And I know with the 666 bills that listening to everyone completely and thoroughly could be challenging, but I want to hear from the people I represent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In this next question, I'll ask Representative Casson to speak first. What is the most important underfunded or unfunded program in South Dakota's government? And while he's doing that, if any of the candidates want me to repeat a question, particularly those that are going fourth and fifth in the line, don't hesitate to ask me to do that, okay? Would you like me to ask the question again, or are you good?
That's number 3. Oh. I just got to get my notes together here.
Focusing on underfunded and unfunded programs in South Dakota.
Well, truly, at the end of the day, it comes down to prioritizing limited resources, right? This is what we do. This is what we do in the Appropriations Committee every day. We see all kinds of requests from every department who sees the needs, whether it's in human services or whether it's in the Department of Health or whether it's in the Department of Natural Resources, whatever it is. We see where that's the agency in charge of being that subject matter expert. So we get all kinds of requests on how we can impact people's lives where they see there's gaps. And I think that's one of the things that that I take pride in as a appropriations member and as a legislator, is I listen to that and I kind of understand, and so therefore you can start to balance, needs versus wants and what makes sense, so that we continue to be fiscally responsible and we aren't spending unwisely. They need to make their case why it makes sense to be funded, and I think that's one of the things that we do. As far as areas, education is always going to be important to me. I'm a product of public education, graduate of the University of South Dakota, continue to work for the University of South Dakota Foundation. My wife teaches at the University of South Dakota, and education has always been a large part of our life. My dad was a college football player, and the only reason he went to college was because he happened to be a pretty good football player, and they pulled him off the farm to do it. So education will continue to be a key part of everything that I do and that I stand for. And then I just think, we've talked a lot today about elder care, but there's gaps in health care. that we've continued to try and fund, making sure that the most vulnerable people in South Dakota have the treatment and the care that they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Ken Redler.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I'd say elder care. Rural health care workforce support is one of the most strained areas. Instead of growing bureaucracy, we should focus on the resources, recruitment, retention, and service-based initiatives that providers working in local communities, especially where it's limited. Elder care is important to me, obviously, because I'm the subject matter expert. I've had 23 years of experience in that industry. I've seen when things go wrong. Another quick example that I've got is there was a federal regulation that came down that a pharmacist should ask for antipsychotic medications to be reduced. We send thousands of letters on a monthly basis. This was in order to reduce costs of brand name pharmaceuticals named Seroquel and Zyprexa. They were able to kill that bill until they went generic. So we never saved any money from this program. Yet 10 years later, we continue to send thousands of letters to doctors and making a needle in the haystack for everything that's really important that we want to communicate to the doctor. And the doctor sends thousands of letters back, or we fine the facilities. So it is very, very challenging when we're running into regulations that are adding costs, adding complexity, and taking away from the care that we can provide to these vulnerable people. So that's just an example. How much time you got? I've only got about another 46 seconds, so I really can't get into all of them. But cutting regulations all regulations have a cost. I think those regulations need to be better scoped when the regulations come out. I think that sometimes they think it would be a small burden to these facilities when another regulation comes down the pike. Long-term care facilities are the second most regulated industry in the country, only seconded to nuclear power. So it's challenging.
Thank you. And before we hear from Candidate Shiro, that clock is oftentimes a little bit ahead or behind, depending on what the last person said. So just look for me for, you're good until I raise my finger. Okay.
Okay?
Yes, please.
Okay. 17 veterans die by suicide each day, a number that hasn't meaningfully changed for 15 years, despite an annual federal budget of $588 million for its preventative programs. In the recent National Veteran Suicide Prevention Annual Report, it showed that the overall veteran suicide rate is entrenched at roughly double that of the general population and is edging upward, not down. Based on 2023 data, the veteran suicide rate in South Dakota was approximately 39.1 per 100,000, often ranking among the highest in the nation. The rate is higher than the national veteran suicide rate of 35.2 per 100,000. Veteran suicide rates in South Dakota are consistently higher than the suicide rate of the general population in the state. The highest average suicide rates in South Dakota happen between the ages of 35 to 74. So South Dakota needs to find better ways to help our veterans than just through federal funding sources and provide better access to programs that may help with the suicide issue. Since South Dakota is so rural, we need to consider providing tele-VA services similar to telemedicine and eliminate the bureaucracy of the VA paperwork for those types of services. Give incentives to medical staff willing to help veterans with reduced fees, pro bono work, or donation of their time. As the only candidate in my race that has served in the military, when I fully retire, I would like to help veterans with their paperwork to apply for disability, with their medical paperwork and appointments, and even prepare their taxes. After having taken a course in Earned Income Tax Credit, which is refundable federal tax credit for low to moderate income working individuals and families, particularly those with children. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll turn to Candidate Church.
Thank you. So my issue is a lot closer to home, and it would be the 2024 McCook Lake Flood and Disaster Cleanup Mitigation Plan. That's not funded. I think that it should be funded. I would get the right people and agencies involved. I would refer to my defense support to civil authorities I was trained on while in the Army. I would work with the governor's office, the adjutant general's office. I would work with the South Dakota Office of Emergency Management and the South Dakota Department of Public Safety. I would work with my fellow legislators to create a fund to study and implement future flood mitigation measures and then fund those measures. I would work with our federal officials, our senators and our representative, to get FEMA funding and federal dollars for future flood mitigation. I would tie these federal dollars to the federal navigable waters, the Big Sioux, the Missouri, and the James River, working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. I would also tie these federal dollars to interstate commerce and work with the U.S. Department of Transportation as they manage federal funding for transportation, infrastructure, including highways and bridges. I'd also tie into the Federal Highway Administration and Surface Transportation Boards, both who ensure compliance and safety. Of course, I wouldn't do this personally. I would work with our representatives in D.C. to get that done. Some of you may have seen that Senator Rounds just recently sent a mailing that talked about the water infrastructure, $20 million that he got for northern South Dakota. We ought to get something like that here for southern South Dakota. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. To the previous speaker's comments, absolutely, McCook Lake in that area was devastated in 2024. And proud to say that help is on the way. It has been on the way. We've been working diligently with the federal government and our state government monitoring and delivering support. The Corps of Engineers is already got a study underway. That request was made last spring and is in action. When we look at that area, we have a tri-state area where you need multiple layers of government, state governments. This isn't just one state government, right? We're talking about South Dakota, Iowa, and Nebraska. You've got multiple municipalities involved. You've got multiple counties involved. And so been proud to be a part of a lot of those conversations. On a state level, we approved about $15 million in community development block grants to aid McCook Lake in their flood recovery, and that money has already been delivered and has plans and is beginning to work. Their North Sioux City government officials have been incredibly communicative about where the progress is in providing updates to us, and it's been a pleasure working alongside them in the recovery efforts. In regards to other underfunded programs, I look at our Child Protective Services, to be honest with you, in DSS. These workers are incredibly underpaid and overworked and short-staffed, and they are tasked with trying to protect some of our most vulnerable children in the state. And I've had issues with providing advocacy for families in this district and providing advocacy for children. And it seems like it keeps coming to a matter of staff support and resources. And so that's somewhere that's near and dear to my heart that I hope to help with.
So for the next question, I would like House Candidate Redler to begin, okay? Does the South Dakota State Legislature spend too much time considering narrow social issues and not enough time on economic and other issues affecting the entire state?
I believe economic issues should always be front and center. I believe that we're the most productive when we focus on jobs, taxes, infrastructure, healthcare access, and affordability, and those are my points, and those are the things I want to focus on. The issues South Dakotans deal with every single day. I've heard this before. Good policy is good politics. I think it's important. The devil is in the details. We need to make sure we are decisive in our decisions and not get bogged down with social issues, because there's enough on our plate looking at the economic concerns and environment in the state, making sure that we are protecting the most vulnerable, that our funding is targeted, not just broadly spaced. Believe it or not, I've found things that when you see so many things that are underfunded, it's really unfortunate to see things that are flush with cash, and we need to reallocate those resources more effectively, in my opinion. So thank you for the question.
Thank you.
At times, I think that the legislature does focus too much on narrow social issues at the expense of broader economic concerns. But it's difficult to please all 66 counties in South Dakota. For example, when things that may be important to the East River may not be important to the West River. Certain issues such as affordability of food, clothing, housing, healthcare, daycare, schooling, property taxes, etc., are social issues as well as economic concerns. When some states have an effective property tax rate of approximately 0.5%, which ranks among the lowest in the nation for the percentage of a home's actual value paid, yet South Dakota ranks nearly the middle of the nation with an effective property tax rate of roughly 1.14 to 1.35, then South Dakota has not concentrated on the social issues or the broader economic concerns. We need to change this effective property tax rate in South Dakota by going after the unclaimed property dollars through abandonment legislation so that we can decrease the effective property tax rate. Not eliminate property taxes altogether, because the counties and cities need those dollars, but to set that effective property tax rate at a level that is among the lowest in the nation and not near the middle. Thank you.
Thank you.
So yes, I think the legislature should defend social values, but it must also ensure that economic stewardship remains front and center. South Dakota families are dealing with rising property taxes, health care costs, and the long-term risks of relying on Washington, D.C. for nearly half of the state's budget. When the legislative session devotes disproportionate time to narrow social fights, it can leave less room for the economic reforms that directly affect household budgets and the state's long-term fiscal health. So I would say yes, at times we do focus too heavily on those social issues at the expense of core functions of government. Thank you.
I would just go back to our legislative process. We're a citizen legislature. We go up to Pierre, represent you for approximately 40 days, and then we come back and live and work amongst you, our friends and neighbors, and live under the laws that we help create the rest of the year. And so, you know, I don't necessarily think all 666 bills that were introduced this year were probably absolutely necessarily important for this to solve those problems this year. They weren't maybe a priority of mine, but they were a priority to somebody. And so I try to be respectful of that and understanding of that of our process. And we have a very transparent process in South Dakota where every bill gets a hearing. And so you can go back through the Legislative Research Council website and you can see the bills that I've sponsored. If those are aligned with your priorities, I try to focus all of my legislation on pertinent priorities that I think are solving everyday problems that folks back home are bringing to me or bringing concerns to me. And so I try to focus my priorities on everyday problems. My colleagues have their priorities, and so that's part of our process and part of the consequence of who who the voters elect in their representative districts.
Thank you. So for the final question,
Oh, he didn't get the answer.
I don't have to.
He didn't.
no, I think you should. Would you like me to repeat the question since I tripped you up that way?
I got it. So
Sorry about that.
That's all right. So the reality is exactly what Senator Davis just mentioned. The reality is we deal with the bills that come before us, and that's the legislative process that we have. There's 105 legislators, and I've said this before. The only thing that actually all 105 legislators have in common is that they got elected, right? I mean, you have friends, you have different, but the only thing that binds all 105 legislators is they were elected by roughly the same number of people in their district as everyone else. So their motives, the reasons they bring a bill, the bills that they bring, that's based upon the constituents that elect, that's based upon them being elected and the constituents that they represent. So trying to judge what bills is kind of, I don't know that that's a worthwhile exercise. I would say, if I was to make, and I've often said my biggest criticism of the legislature in itself is just the lack of long-term planning and the lack of looking 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years into the future. A lot has to do with we turn over so often, right? We have term limits, which actually aren't readily utilized. A lot of times people will quit after 2 years, 4 years, 6 years. Due to personal reasons, and the legislature turns over about 40% new people every term that the last terms that I've served. So when you have that many new people, you tend to focus on the more acute issues and not look out into the future to things like elder care or child care or community growth or housing or things like that, that it could impact the communities in our districts longer term when we are just incredibly focused on the acute issues facing today. Thank you for the answer.
Well, would you like another couple seconds for?
I'm good.
Want to make sure you get your time.
Yeah, thank you.
This next question, we're going to ask House candidate Shiro to begin, and it is a rather long question, but I think it's an important one. So I'm going to take a little bit of a liberty and ask the question at the end twice, right? So I'm going to begin with the end. The question is, what is your plan to equalize the tax burden according to the biblical principle of paying one's fair share as a percentage of their income? Now I'll read the whole question again so everyone in the audience can understand the preface. The new plans to reduce property tax burdens range from eliminating the property tax to supplanting some of the revenue raised from property taxes to be replaced by sales taxes. Taxes where the lowest 40% of families, that is less than $50,000 annual income, pay a much higher rate of sales and local taxes as a percentage of their income, as do the highest 40% of families who make more than $136,500. What is your plan to equalize the tax burden according to the biblical principle of paying one's fair share as a percentage of their income? And don't ask me to repeat that more than once.
No, it wasn't one of our questions, so now I'm going to wing it, so. South Dakota is one of the few states with no corporate or individual income tax, increasing the reliance on sales and property tax balance. South Dakota balances lack of income tax by heavily relying on the 4.2% state sales tax and local taxes for revenue, which using property taxes primarily for local government and school funding. Sales tax accounts for 40.5% of the total state tax collections. The state general sales tax is 4.2%, with a 6.11% average combined rate, including cities. Property taxes make up 75% of local government's tax revenue. In March of this year, South Dakota Governor Larry Roden signed legislation, Senate Bill 245, designed to increase the state sales tax from 4.2% to 4.5% on July 1 of 2027, generating an estimated $114 million annually. This revenue is designated for a homeowner property tax reduction fund, primarily targeted to reduce local school district property taxes. Another signed measure this year was Senate Bill 96, which allows counties to impose an additional 0.5% sales tax, with those proceeds also directed toward offsetting local property taxes. I should note that I am the only candidate in the race that has been a county commissioner, therefore one that has sat as the Board of Equalization in front of constituents when they disagree with their property tax assessments. I would say that was the hardest part of my job, and I wanted to take their property taxes down to where they felt they should be. But property taxes were necessary to help provide them with ambulances, fire trucks, water and sewers, roads and bridges, schools, law enforcement, public health care, etc., to our communities. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was a long question, so I'll have a long answer.
It's really about balancing the obligation more than just property taxes.
Yeah, I want to focus on property taxes as well. And I want to remind everybody first that property taxes are a county issue, not a state issue.
Yeah, that's what I
So
said.
your state legislature doesn't have a lot to do. I mean, there are impacts that they can have, but it really lays on the county. So our schools take up the majority of our property taxes. School administrators and school boards must ensure that they're not spending wastefully. We should consider how we could have less administrators and apply those reduced costs to increased actual teacher salaries. I like the idea of capping salaries to 10% of the teacher salary. We should also relook requiring any school opt-outs to automatically go to the local voters for approval before being implemented. We can strengthen caps on property growth, improve valuation practices so homeowners aren't punished by inflated assessments, and expanding relief programs for seniors and disabled homeowners who are the hardest hit by rising bills. We could also consider allowing counties to retain a small share of state collected revenues. using a per capita distribution to equalize rural and urban counties from state collected taxes. Some of these are state sales tax, contractor's excise tax, a percentage of the motor vehicle excise tax, a percentage of the state fuel tax, a percentage of the bank franchise tax, a percentage of mineral severance tax, and a percentage of tourism tax. If counties could get this money back, then we could lower our overall property taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Davis.
Would you briefly just restate the question?
Yeah, this is a difficult question because it appears that the candidates were not presented with the question, so I feel badly about asking it. But it's really a question about balancing tax obligations across the many different demographic groups in South Dakota. So the final question after the description says, what is your plan to equalize the tax burden according to the biblical principle of paying one's fair share as a percentage of income, recognizing that people at different socioeconomic levels are paying disproportionate burdens within the current tax structure?
Well, the fact that South Dakota doesn't have an income tax makes us incredibly unique for this region. And a lot of people want to live here because we don't have one. And so that rewards folks that earn more and work harder, and allows them to keep more money in their pockets. And that's a favorable uniqueness to our state in the region, and I've consistently heard from folks that they don't want an income tax. So to kind of answer your question more directly, what do we do next then? Property tax is the next most fair way to meet the obligations that our local governments need. And as kind of stated in other answers, the state has the ability to kind of make certain reforms, certain policy changes, try to allow for relief for those that need it the most, right? Our elderly, folks on fixed incomes, perhaps folks that meet low income thresholds. And so we have a variety of relief programs available. And I do think awareness for those relief programs is important. I think being mindful of where our sales tax rate is important. As we've heard from other candidates today, that there has been new legislation put in place to implement a new county sales tax at the option of the county. We need to be mindful of who is paying that, and a lot of times, and who's benefiting from that new revenue. And as the question is alluding to, is the fact that folks that don't own their property that they live in will not receive the benefit, but they will be paying more. And so I was hesitant to support that legislation for that reason.
Well, I'll start off by, she kind of talked a little bit about the awareness of some property tax things that we have in South Dakota, some programs that we have, and I actually brought copies of all off the Department of Revenue of all the property tax reductions, whether it's the Homestead Act or some reductions due to disabled veterans and things like that. So the copies, so there's 40 copies over there of all the programs that are offered in South Dakota. I will say that they aren't very well publicized, and it's something, it's in another question, it's something that we should actually do a better job on. With regards to this, to Mr. Church's point, it's important to understand how the system is actually set up in South Dakota. We have a broad-based sales tax system that funds state government, and that's been our model. It's been the way that we've done things, and it's allowed us to avoid an income tax. And quite frankly, an income tax is unpopular with me, and it's unpopular with the people that we represent here in District 17. Property taxes are different. Property taxes are used at the local level. They fund our schools, our counties, our municipal, our local services. We do not see property taxes at the state level. So I guess when we talk about fairness, I think it's about being responsible at all levels. At the state level, we need to keep our tax structure stable and predictable so people and businesses know what to expect. At the local level, it's important that decisions around property taxes are made carefully and transparently, because that's where people feel it the most. And overall, I think fairness means being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. making sure we're spending responsibly and keeping the burden as reasonable as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I want to highlight that this definitely has two sides to this issue. It's also my understanding there's not political support for an income tax at this time. But that doesn't mean that we can't look at the problem from a spending perspective. We need to reduce regulations that drive cost. We need to reduce waste where we can find it. We need to have targeted relief measures, and I actually have all of them. Thanks, Senator Sidney Davis, for forwarding these to me. There is sales tax and property tax refund for seniors and disabled citizens, so that's a sales tax relief. Yep, coffee's over there. And then there is property tax freeze authorized for agricultural properties for a beginning farmer. That's an economic one that's going to allow new farmers to have benefit for getting started, so that's important. Disabled veterans property tax exemption program, freeze on assessments for dwellings for disabled and senior citizens, and the homestead exemption programs. All of these are examples of programs that I fundamentally support. And I really think that if we were to engage with community organizations to raise awareness, so we wouldn't have to have a large budget to advertise these items, which would be counter to our being fiscally responsible, but making sure that community organizations can disseminate these programs appropriately, and these get used by the people that deserve these programs and the reason these programs were developed.
Thank you very much. Sorry for throwing that curveball at you all. You did a fine job answering the Government Affairs Committee's questions. Now we'd like to turn our attention to audience questions, folks who have showed up today. So with the help of some of the Government Affairs Committee members, we'll allow time to do that. Yeah, I'll let you go first.
Good morning. It's a pleasure not being sitting up there and actually listening down here. I'm learning a lot. Do you have ideas on how schools can educate problem and disruptive students without impacting the other students' opportunity to learn? So let's take it grade school separate from middle high school.
We'll go back to Senate candidate Church for a first response.
So, in short, no, but I did go through public school. I was generally a good student, had no issues, but I did have some friends who had mild problems. I think the way that those things were handled was when I was in first and second grade, you went down to the principal's office and got a paddling. I don't think we do that anymore. I'm not sure that's the best way to do it. But we did have after-school detentions. Those were some ways that disruptive students were handled. I think it's a very challenging issue because you have some students who excel at their grade level and the work that's presented is not challenging for them, and so they may lose interest and become disruptive. And then you have other children who are not as productive in the classroom, who because of frustration may become productive. So I think that probably one of the issues that we could have is make sure that for each of our grade requirements that we don't pass a child who has not met the grade standards, right? If you can't read, if you can't do math, and if you can't write, don't move forward. Now that could create some social stigma for a child. I see my clock isn't moving. How much time do I have?
You're still good.
Okay. So I think that it's a challenge because you have this complete range of child interest and ability in one classroom. And you have one teacher. And that teacher has a lesson plan and tries to accommodate the gifted child and the less gifted child. So it's a struggle. Maybe we have teacher assistants that could help with students that need additional assistance or guidance, but a challenging problem, obviously, for the classroom.
Thanks for the question. When I meet with teachers, school administrators, principals, counselors throughout the year, this is something that frequently comes up. How do we help some of our students that are struggling? And when I say struggling, I mean, we're talking about severe behavior issues that they have never seen in their decades of teaching. Violent behavior, that is more than what any of them have seen in some of their decades of experience. And so they're faced with a unique challenge, without a doubt. And they're looking for support. And support costs money. Counseling services cost money, extra staff costs money. All of that is strenuous on their already limited budgets. And then not just, even if they did have the financial resources, do they have the workforce available to meet that child's needs? And so, interestingly, this last session, I was really excited to support this effort of where we, I think, are moving the needle in a pilot program to start up in an Aberdeen area, a school where some of these children can get some intense services in the region. Because right now, because we don't have facilities like that in South Dakota, and what South Dakota is doing right now and in our district is doing, some of these very disruptive, violent children that have significant emotional and social barriers are being sent to special schools or special facilities, maybe on a day basis. They go for during the day and then they come home at night. They're being transported. They have to go maybe to a location in Iowa. This is pertinent to, because of our tri-state area nature, or maybe in South Sioux City, Nebraska. And so then South Dakota taxpayers are taking care of that additional cost. And so if we have the resources and investing in the resources in this state, we can help better serve those needs.
Thank you.
Senator Davis is spot on. This is something, and Representative Shorma has been a part of several conversations, many conversations that we've had with local school boards, with our local superintendents, our teachers, educators, not just in our district, but throughout the state, who have talked about the concern they have for the rising student behavior they're seeing in their classroom. And it's just to a level, as Senator Davis said, that the likes that they've never seen. A lot of times we talk in South Dakota about low teacher pay, and that's driving people out of the profession. What we fail to recognize, and what is now coming to the forefront, is a lot of people are leaving the teaching profession because of the behavior of the students, and they just don't want to be a part of that atmosphere anymore. And I will tell you, in the last session, there were a couple of bills. I'll get to the one Senator Davis mentioned, but there was another bill. There was one bill that was supported by the Department of Education and the teachers that allowed the school districts the authority, and it's permissible for them to remove troubled students from the classroom. And that's something that is, I think, something that we should do. When you're teaching 25 students and one student is disrupting the learning capabilities of the other 24, is that really fair, right? And so, as Senator Davis mentioned, what we were glad to support was this facility in Brown County that offered kind of a midpoint between sending these troubled students back to school, which is largely what we do, or sending them to juvenile detention or jail, right? Can we find somewhere in the middle where we're actually providing help for these folks and these students so that they can go back to school? And so I was proud to support that. Again, as Representative Shorma has been part of, and Senator Davis and I have been part of lots of conversations about how this is impacting our state and things that we can continue to do all across the state. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to answer that question by saying I've learned most of what I know about the school system from my 11-year-old in the back row over there. He's been pretty good today, so thanks for sitting still, Alex. I think it's important for them to be engaged in the process and interested in the subject matter. I think that we need to think of it a little bit differently to make sure they do find an understanding of the importance of education, the path that they're on. Customize a path to drive engagement is important. I think faith-based initiatives to promote respect and an ethical foundation should be part of that as well. We need to think differently. I said earlier, we definitely look at apprenticeships. You know, sometimes students know they're not on a college pathway and they don't understand why they need to go to all of these classes they don't believe apply to them. So maybe giving them a pathway through apprenticeships earlier so that they can learn the trades that we very much need in our society. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say that cell phone use, there was a bill that was suggested to limit cell phone use, obviously, in school. I'm a big proponent of that. If you look at the judgments against Meta and Facebook, they were manipulating our youth, and I think the damage was done when they were promoting those apps and programs to engage them into the system. They made it illegal in gambling to have a camera look at your eyes to see what your engagement was. The people that used it to work in the gambling industry are now selling applications to your children to engage them in that way. So illegal in the gambling industry, but totally legal for Google and Facebook.
Thank you.
All of my teachers, I mean, all my sisters are teachers, so this one hits home to me. I tutor at-risk kids. I tutor at-risk kids that are even in first grade, that their brothers or sisters are in their 20s, and so they need help. They don't understand the issues, and they act out because of that. I have a sister-in-law that's a special education teacher also, and things that she tells me is that maybe the kids need glasses, and Lions Club could help provide that. Maybe they're autistic, and they need the help with a mental health expert for that. Maybe they're dyslexic, like I am, and they need help with that. Maybe they're audio and not visual kids. I mean, you just don't know, and we need to test them and see and help through that, and the special ed section helps that. We need to get them involved with other kids, such as the Boys and Girls Club, after school, to keep them out of trouble and help them work together with other kids. We need to get them involved in sports. I played sports. My parents made every single one of us, when we were 6 kids, play sports, every sport. We didn't like it, but we did it because it taught us to be a team player. You need to read to them if they're younger and make the learning fun. My husband, when he does partners, which he helps volunteer for that, he helps the kids to learn how to count cards. Whether it's 21 or anything else, he helps them. And that helps the kids focus, and they care. They can relate to cards. They need analogies like football or things that they can relate to. We need to help them get involved in repairing vehicles, woodworking, cooking classes, any of those types of classes that can help them learn their passion and direct their focus to where they want to be. Also, I would like to say that the parents need training. I was involved in Columbine. We were there in Colorado, and we went and lived through Columbine. That was horrible. And so I think that the communities need to train the parents also. The parents, my sisters say that they've become a parent as a teacher more and more every year.
Just in the time. Thank you very much. The second question, which will come from the audience, we'll ask Senator Davis to respond to first. Is there another question?
This is a really easy question.
What's the next question? Well, I have a whole set of questions here, if no one. Fantastic. And Senator Davis, if you could respond first.
I have a question for Ms. Shiro. You indicated in campaign material and verbally here this morning that we have a problem in this state with election interference or election integrity. I'm wondering what documented data or evidence or whatever you want to call it do you have that you can share with voters, because you mentioned all the way up to the Attorney General, which is a
Right.
very serious allegation. I'd appreciate what you could share with us.
Right. I can't discuss in length about the Attorney General, but the FBI is involved. As far as the election integrity side, the election, the audit was done paper ballot versus computer system. For Clay County and Union County, which is our district, was done, and I looked, and I have that printed off, and you can get online and get it from the Secretary of State's office. And in the policies and procedures for that audit, every race must be included at least once, meaning one precinct. They look at the precincts, and they need to include it once. The race of me and Representative Shorna and Representative Casson is not included in Clay County or Union County. So they were never either audited or they're kept from the public to see the audit. I'm not sure which it is. But they're looking into it, and other people are looking into it. Another issue was if you get in that audit and you add the numbers up, they don't add up to who they say won the race. So those are the types of things. And I do have copies of those audits, but you can get online and get those audits from the Secretary of State's office.
Thank you. Would any of the other candidates like to speak, perhaps Senator Davis first, about election interference and any concerns in that area of activity?
Sure, thank you. You know, I think we've got a pretty good system in South Dakota. We are some of the few states that still use paper ballots. A lot of states use electronic ballots and things like that. And so we use paper ballots. I've been a part of and watched and voted on a lot of election reform regarding the audits that the previous speaker talked about, to add to transparency and things along that nature. I think our auditors do a great job. In the last couple of years, especially as questions have come and there's been some distrust amongst the public. I think the South Dakota legislature has been responsive to try to restore that trust and pass reforms along those lines. And if you have questions, I would encourage you to go to your local county auditor. They are election specialists. They are the subject matter experts and are incredibly knowledgeable to help you answer your questions and address any concerns you have.
I mean, I don't have anything more to add than I've won essentially one primary and 2 general elections, and I will tell you, due to all of the security measures and things that Senator Davis mentioned that we put in place, that, when I go to bed the night of election night and I wake up in the morning, I'm 100% confident that the election results are correct and that, either I won or I lost, and life's going to go on. So whether it's election interference or election integrity, I feel like we are doing as good a job as we possibly can do. I'm sure there'll be more tweaks moving forward, but like I said, I wake up after every election day feeling 100% confident that I was elected.
I don't have much to add, other than the fact that I do know that Bill Sherma did lose a race by 24 votes, and it was audited. I believe that number is correct, Bill, and you went back and you were able to go back through the paper ballots, and it was 24 exactly. So that gave me confidence. I have limited exposure to that, but I thought that that tied out, and I thought that was interesting.
Thank you. One of my prior jobs in the Army, I worked at the Pentagon as the U.S. Army's Division Chief for Cyberspace Strategy and Policy. That was a fun job, working across the entire Army spectrum with that. And what I learned there was nothing electronic is totally secure. You can air gap, there's many things that you can do, changing, updating passwords, etc., but nothing electronic is completely secure. I would say that for election integrity, I would prefer that we use paper ballots. Paper ballots are much harder to manipulate than an electronic system that you can or cannot prove is even connected to the internet. So I know there's lots of checks. I have not studied this in any great depth for South Dakota elections, but my general attitude would be paper ballots are better. I've worked as an election volunteer here in Clay County. I've seen the process. I've seen people come up to the desk. I've seen the people display their identification and take their paper ballots, vote, put them in the lock box, and at the end of the day, 2 parties escort that lock box back to the county where those ballots are checked. So I'm fairly confident that that system works. I didn't see any issues as an election volunteer with tampering in the process. But again, just generally based on my experience, I would say that paper ballots are more secure than electronic ballots.
Thank you. Now we'll turn back to the audience for more questions. If there are none, I have one last question I think we could ask. Anyone have a question? Okay, well, I will ask, I think, a good question to give you all an opportunity to share your platforms and your priorities. And we'll ask Representative Casson to go first. On which legislative committee would you be most interested serving and why? What policies or programs would you promote on this committee?
Yeah, really good question, Dr. Bronstein, and I will just tell you, I will choose appropriations every single time and twice on Sunday. It's the hardest working committee in the legislature. We meet every day compared to the policy committees that Senator Davis or Representative Shorma serves on. We start at 7 in the morning. Oftentimes we go back after session, and we craft the state budget every year. I will tell you, we got overwhelming support from all of the House leadership, all of the Senate leadership in order to put forth a budget that I thought was as responsive to the taxpayers as we possibly can be, right? I mean, we're trying to increase inflationary increases so that our state employees, which many of the folks in our district are, education is a huge point in our district, and then our Medicaid providers, we did some really good things for rural health care, making sure that rural health care, critical access hospitals, federally qualified health centers, FQHCs, there's one actually in Elk Point, the increase in funding for them so that they can stay open. So I also I also was the leader of the work group that reduced unutilized FTE, that reduced the federal fund authority by over $100 million, that reduced the other fund authority by over $50 million. So, you know, I think we're having up here about cuts and adding. I think there's a balance involved, and I think appropriations does a really good job on that balance, balancing those interests, working with the House leadership and the Senate leadership, the governor's office, to make sure that with the limited amount of resources that we have, that we're addressing the issues that we heard throughout the session. So when it comes to committees, I will tell you, every day and twice on Sunday, you might think I'm crazy, I would always love to be on the Appropriations Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I would prioritize committees related to appropriations, health and human services, and taxation, where I can bring practical experience to discussion on budgets, healthcare access, and tax fairness. I think that my background as a small business owner and my background at taking care of 2,000 of the most vulnerable in our population is got me a perspective on this that's unique, and I think I could bring a lot of perspective to other legislators and draft in the healthcare space. Appropriations obviously dovetails into that. You know, we can only do what we have funding for. I know that there's regulations that we can take care of. I know that there is complexities that drive cost. I know that we need to make sure that, you know, we're looking after our seniors, but we're doing it in a way that's targeted. You know, I did actually talk with Chris Cassens, and I said, with the amount of demand in this coming in the next 10 years, there's actually almost no amount of money at the current system. We need to think differently. We need to have different solutions. We need to look at home health care as a real, keeping them out of nursing homes, increasing access to assisted livings, keeping those facilities open. Because when they close, costs actually go up because of transportation costs and all the associated expenses of having to transport people long distances. We need to, if you're in a hole and you're digging, the first thing you have to do is stop digging. You know, and then assess your situation. So I think that definitely adds to it. You know, part of the reason I am running, I was proud to meet Senator Sidney Davis at the Isaac Walton last December, and she stated that she was advocating for her profession. And when she was in the legislature, she's like, there's not a lot of people that currently are involved in the healthcare space, and that perspective could be utilized. So I appreciate that.
Thank you. I'd like to serve on the Ag and Natural Resources, Military and Veterans Affairs, and Transportation Standing Committees. The Ag and Natural Resource initiatives, establish South Dakota as a state that works, I would like to establish South Dakota as a state that works with EPA on pollution prevention grants and interns for the Department of Ag and Natural Resources and the state universities. Since Iowa, Nebraska, Kansas, and Texas already do this, but South Dakota does not. I would establish a Natural Resources Governor's Award, since there currently is a Governor's Ag Award, but not one for natural resources. As far as the military and veterans affairs, South Dakota needs to find better ways to help our veterans than just through federal funding sources, and provide better access to programs that may help with the suicide issue. As I stated before, since South Dakota is so rural, we need to consider providing tele-VA services similar to telemedicine and other things like that. As the only candidate in my race that has served in the military, I would like to have the state help veterans with their paperwork, as I described before, to apply for disability and et cetera. Transportation, as a civil engineer, I think I could help with this. I worked for a highway department and a state highway department for years. I would like to charge the semi-trucks traveling through the state and other states, from other states, weight, distance taxes, highway user taxes, miles driven, the international fuel tax agreement, emerging road user charges that vehicle miles traveled that other states are looking at, and piloting. So, thank you.
Well, it's an easy question for me. I'm not looking forward to the work. I don't like getting up early in the morning, despite 30 years of Army service. I think Chris knows where this is going. I would like to serve on the Appropriations Committee. I understand that it's a very long day every day, but I think our state budget is where we find and create answers to all of these questions that we've had. Right? The state budget is what ends up driving everything else. And so I think that it's very important to be on the Appropriations Committee so that I can help address these economic issues that we've been talking about. I want to reduce state spending. I want to get off of the 40% federal budget that we receive from federal dollars. Since 2020, our state budget has increased $2.5 billion. Do you feel like you've gotten $2.5 billion worth of increased benefits and services since 2020? I don't. We've got 104.7 more full-time employees since 2022. Think of a full-time equivalent as a government employee. So we've got almost 105 more full-time employees since 2020. Yes, there was a period of time where our budget and our FTEs did go down in that period, but overall up $2.5 billion. So I want to work on that. And as I said earlier, I want to work on figuring out ways to end the special interest dollars. I would like to get rid of that. I would like to challenge the Governor's Office of Economic Development and the monies that they spend. So appropriations for me, despite the long hours, that sacrifice would be worth it.
I've had the honor of sitting on a variety of committees in my time, State Affairs, Health and Human Services, serving as Vice Chair of Health and Human Services, Education, Ag and Natural Resources most recently, and then also the Tax Committee. And I appreciate legislative leadership putting me there on those committees. I felt like my experience and my background, I've been able to really contribute to those conversations and help craft good policy on those committees. And so ultimately it is up to legislative leadership who makes the committee assignments, and I feel like I've earned a lot of respect from them and demonstrated my abilities to be effective wherever they place me. Obviously, Health and Human Services is a strong suit of mine, and also Ag and Natural Resources, and so I'd be happy to serve wherever they place me. I am confident that I can be effective for our folks here back home wherever I serve. So thank you for the question.
Thank you so much for the answer. And for all the candidates, for all of your fine answers today. It has been very informative and extremely helpful to hear from all of you. We'll move now to closing statements. Each of the candidates will have 2 minutes to make their closing statements. And if you don't mind, sir, we'll ask you to begin since you are next in line.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you again, Dr. Brownstein, organizers, and everyone who participated this morning. What you've heard this morning reflects a real choice, not about personalities, but about focus. In District 17, we don't need big promises. We need leadership. We need understands that raising property taxes actually does to retirees' kitchen table budget and the pharmacy technicians that work for me. Leadership that understands what happens when healthcare disappears in a rural community. Leadership that respects the people working, caregiving, raising families here, and doesn't treat those realities as afterthoughts. I believe government should help people stay in their homes, keep care close to home, and build opportunity here, not make those goals harder to reach. That means practical tax relief, rule-aware healthcare policy, disciplined budgeting that plans ahead instead of shifting risk to local communities. I do want to also address with the VA, I'm a large supporter of the VA. We have a lot of recipients of the VA benefits in our nursing homes, and we have never charged additional for our services. That's unique in our industry. We can't bill the VA for the pharmaceuticals, so we house, repackage, reorder, and deal with all of the back-end processes so that the facilities that we serve have access to those medications in the way that they need to be presented to the facilities. We've never charged for that, and we never will. We believe that if you find a place that you can be charitable in your own organization, that's the place you need to do it. So I'm running to be a steady, common sense voice in District 17, focused on results, accountability, and local values. I would be honored to earn your vote. I appreciate the opportunity to serve. Once again, I'm Troy Redler, and I hope I have earned your support.
Since you heard our introduction, which kind of tells my background, I thought I'd just go through the parts that I really firmly believe that one of us should be a part of your community in every aspect that we can, because we need to learn about what you do, what you need, what you want. And so I'm just going to give you some of the things that I'm a servant leader. I feel that you really need to be the person that gives back to your community in every way, even as a legislator. It's 3 months that you're going to be away from the community. You won't be able to during that time probably, but at least you can give it back on those other months that you're here. I'm involved in all different things. I help with the Lions Club with the glasses. I coach Special Olympics ice skating, and I volunteer. I am a volunteer soccer coach. I've coached boys soccer and girls basketball, little boys and 5-year-olds, and girls basketball is 5th grade. I go ahead, I've worked with Kiwanis with kids. I'm an Eagles Auxiliary, have been an Eagles Auxiliary member and help with fundraise for that and all different organizations. I've been a Rotarian since 2012 and on and off at different places where I've lived. And I've built Habitat for Humanity houses, 3 houses, so I keep my hands into everything that I can to help the community. I've been on Chamber of Commerce and different ones. I'm on your Missouri Valley Growth Board right now here in Vermillion. I've belonged to Economic Development Associations and sat on Regional Economic Development Association boards. I've been part of a Builders Association, different things like that. I want to give back. I'm in your Vermillion Community Garden Board right now, and also the Missouri Valley Master Gardener Board. I work, no matter what I do, I diligently work for the community. And I thank you all for everything that you do, and thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you everyone for coming. As has been mentioned, I'm sure that there's other things you could have been doing today. So I'm grateful that you came here and were willing to participate in this political process. I'm Jeffrey Church, and I'm running for our state Senate seat in District 17. As I told you, I served 30 years in the United States Army on active duty, and after that, we could have gone anywhere in the world we wanted. And I chose to live here in South Dakota because of its values, the faith, the freedom, the personal responsibility, and now I'm running to help protect those values to keep government limited and accountable, to make sure that Pierre works for the people, not the insiders. I am not a career politician, although several years at the Pentagon may have prepared me for a political office. That's a very political building. I have never been elected, as I said, to political office, so I owe no favors to any PACs. I owe no favors to lobbyists. I owe no favors to any person. I'm a Christian, a husband, a father, a grandfather, and a conservative who believes in public service. And I'm ready to fight for District 17, our South Dakota values, and I would be honored to have your vote. Thank you.
Thank you again for everyone for being here, the VCDC for putting on an incredible event, as they are so well known for. It helps keep our public informed, and so that they can increase awareness about the upcoming election. So thank you so much for being here and providing that service and attending today. I think I've got a pretty proven track record of delivering results and being responsive to the community's needs. And I want to thank folks in the community that have trusted me with their ideas to bring them to life and enact change that really moves the needle for our communities and our district. I've been effective and responsive to the community needs, and I look forward to continuing that service for all of you here in this room and those watching at home and those that aren't watching because maybe they're tending to their young ones at home or attending a baseball game this morning or whatever it might be, or farmers in the fields. I want to invite anyone who wants to learn more about me, learn more about the priorities and work that I've done for our district to please visit my website. It's votesydneydavis.com. I'm also on Facebook. You can find me there, and also might find me on your doorstep here looking for a conversation here in the near future. My cell phone is 605-770-7029, as that is publicly listed as well on the Legislative Research Council website too. Thank you again for the visit today. I look to earn your support and ask for your vote on June 2nd.
You know, President Ronald Reagan once said, government's first duty is to protect the people, not to run their lives. That gets to the fundamental question, what is the proper role of government? If you want someone to run your life, I'm probably not your person. But if you believe in limited government and personal freedom, I'd be honored to have your support. That belief is why I serve and how I've approached every decision I've made as your representative the last 4 years. And thank you to the VCDC again for hosting this morning's forum, and thank you all for being here. Your engagement in our process matters. You know, I also want to thank my family. You know, serving in the legislature isn't just my commitment, it's their commitment. It takes all of us, and they sacrifice in order for me to serve in the legislature, so I want to thank them. I also think it's important to mention there are important races up and down the ballot this year. There's a big mayoral race right here in Vermillion. There's a sheriff's race in Union County. There's city council positions, there's school board races, there's statewide primaries. All have major impacts, so I'd encourage all of you to get out and vote, and I'd like to thank all of the people that have stepped forward to decide to run. It takes courage to decide to run, and I appreciate everybody for doing it. You know, I've spent my entire adult life in Vermillion. I love this community. This community has wrapped its arms around me and my family. I think most of you know our daughter has cystic fibrosis, and together with the people in Vermillion and Elk Point and Dakota Dunes and North Sioux City, this district, we've raised over tens of thousands of dollars for research for cystic fibrosis, which has changed the lives of not just our daughter, but many. And that's just a local effort from one family here in South Dakota who was able to bring together so many different people. I'm Representative Chris Casson. I've worked hard over the last 4 years. I've represented this office with integrity. I've stayed focused to keeping government in its proper role. I've made it a priority to be accessible to people of District 17. I'm running for re-election, and I'd appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And to all the candidates, thank you so much for showing up again. That concludes our candidate forum for District 17. Want to thank the VCDC again and especially acknowledge the work of the Government Affairs Committee in preparing the many questions today. This has been a fantastic opportunity for all of us to engage in civic discourse, and to do so civilly is remarkable, and you're all to be congratulated. Thanks to everyone who came out today. You're all champions, and have a great Saturday.
Great job, Dr.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please help yourselves to
What's that?
Thank you so much for being here.
Rich, great job.
Sorry about taking your time away.
Hey,